I want you to stop and think for a moment about a story that's not really in the Torah, not in our section. It's the story of Job. Do you know that story? The story of Job starts out with a view into the heavenly realms, with the realms we don't see. I don't mean just heaven itself, but the spiritual realm, because here's what happens. God's there, and the sons of God, and in among the sons of God comes Satan. And God sees Satan and he says, "Hey Satan, where have you been? What have you been up to?" Satan says, "Oh, just cruising around on the earth." And God says, "Have you checked out my guy Job?" And God says this about Job to Satan: "There's no one like him on earth, a blameless and upright man, fearing God and turning from evil." Job is the kind of guy that God brags about to Satan. Well, here's what Satan says back. He goes, "Yeah, but it's not for nothing. I mean, you've given Job everything a man can want. You've given him money and stuff and kids and health and the house and everything else. I mean, of course the guy's loyal to you." So God says, "Okay, I'll let you take that stuff, and just to prove that that's not why Job likes me and Job follows me." So that's what Satan does. Satan takes his stuff, kills all his kids, takes all his stuff. Now, of course, Job doesn't know this is the deal, that there's been a bargain cut in heaven. All Job knows is that some bad guys killed his kids, some other bad guys took his sheep, some other bad guys took his goats, and another bad guys took his camels, and pretty soon he's got nothing left. But still, he's loyal to God. Then, Satan and God again have a conversation, and Satan says, "Yeah, that's just because you haven't let me touch him." And God says, "Okay, you can touch him, but you can't kill him. That's the one thing you can't do." So Satan then makes Job sick, gives him these big nasty boils. He's got pus, dogs licking him. It's just disgusting. Now, still, Job doesn't curse God, and he is still faithful to God. Now, here's what I want you to see in this story. First of all, there's a battle, there's a warfare, there's activity going on in the unseen realms. In Job's life, in Israel's life, as we'll see in a moment, and in our lives. Right now, there is a conversation being had between Satan and God, and it concerns us, just like it did the Israelites or Job. Only God's not necessarily bragging about us. Now, I tell you that, and I also want you to learn this from the story of Job. Apparently, there's a deal where God can't bribe us to be followers of his, but Satan can. So Satan will try to lure us away with things, or take away our health, or take away our prosperity, and get us to blame God and get mad at him about it. And that's what Satan's trying to do to Job, and that's what Satan does with the children of Israel. But we don't see the behind the scenes stuff. We have to understand that it takes place and know that it takes place by faith. So here's what we need to learn from today's lesson. Whereas God didn't roll out a big red carpet from Egypt straight into the promised land and just cause everyone to just fall over dead, God did give them water when they got thirsty, and he gave them things when they needed it. And now Satan is trying a new tactic, and he's using a man named Balaam, a prophet, to create this problem for the children of Israel. Same thing will be true of us. Now, here's what I want you to consider as we go through this. First, have this little discussion. Then we'll go to the story and then wrap things up. How would Satan attack you? How would Satan attack your friends? Would you just walk up and say, "Hey man, I'll give you everything you ever wanted. I'll make you the greatest guitar player that ever lived, and you'll have lots of women, and you'll have lots of money, and you'll be famous and popular. I'll make you really good looking in exchange for your soul"? No, that wouldn't be a good deal for Satan. He can get you a lot cheaper than that. Satan can get you for little things like being impatient, little things like grumbling, like complaining over every little thing that isn't your way or my way. Greed, lust, envy. These are the things that get us. I just want to be good looking, rich, and popular. That's all I want. And Satan only has to give you the idea that you might be able to get those things. as long as you don't serve God. Talk for a moment about how Satan might tempt you. Think of Satan as a kind of general who's looking for your weak spots, and he's going to find the chink in your armor, and that's what he's going to exploit to get you to turn your back on God in some way or another. Okay, have a little discussion about that, and then we'll go into the story of the children of Israel on spring break. Okay, so here's the story. Like I said, they've been out in the desert a long time at this point. And because there's so many of them, I mean, they're in the millions. So when they get to near a place where other people live, the other people start to freak out a little bit. One of those groups of people was a group of people called the Moabites. Moabites are mentioned in Genesis. They come from Lot, which is Abraham's nephew. Anyway, so they're kind of relatives of the Israelites, but not really. But they would expect them to have some stories about Yahweh because their ancestor Lot would have been related to Abraham and so forth. So the Moabites get concerned and they hire, it's kind of like a hired gunslinger. Only in those days, instead of hiring a gunslinger, you'd hire a prophet and a soothsayer kind of person to come bless you and curse your enemies and everything. So they hire this guy named Balaam. And this isn't our story, but you need to know the background of this because Balaam is the guy that his donkey talked to him. I don't know if you remember that story. If you don't, then you need to have your teacher look that up and tell you that story later on. It's a pretty good deal. But Balaam's kind of a hired prophet, and they keep offering him money to come curse Israel, and Balaam says, no, I can't do it unless Yahweh gives me permission. In other words, Balaam gets that there's no God like Yahweh, and he isn't going to do anything without Yahweh's permission. Eventually, finally, they wear him down, and he comes up with a plan, and the plan is our story today because it's executed this way. Instead of cursing the children of Israel, Balaam seems to have told the king of Moab how to seduce the children of Israel, how to lure them to their own destruction. And what he does, and this is interesting because it's an insight into the way Satan works. And what he does is this. You get 2 million people out in the middle of the desert. A lot of them are young people. A lot of them have never seen anybody but the people that are right there in their own little village. And they've been following Yahweh around in the desert forever. So what they do is they invite them to what amounts to a barbecue, a party. The best way for you to think about it, and the reason why I'm out here today, is because you would think of it as spring break. Just think of it as a college spring break and you're going to Florida or Palm Springs or wherever you're going to go, and you're going to party really hard and stuff, and that's exactly what they do. Now, the way it's described in the Bible, they call it, come offer sacrifices to our god Baal, or Baal we usually call him. And you come offer these sacrifices, but there's also, offering a sacrifice isn't just bowing down and watching. No, it's barbecue meat. So they're sitting there cooking barbecue, they're eating, they're hanging out, they're socializing, and all the pretty young girls of Moab and Midian and other nations around there are being brought out to meet these boys from Israel. And sure enough, man, sexual immorality takes hold all over the place. So there's kids that are misbehaving sexually with these girls from these other places. And so a plague starts sweeping through Israel and wiping everything out from Yahweh, of course, because they're being disobedient, they're sacrificing to a false god, and they're fooling around sexually, and so God causes a plague to sweep across. Israel cries out to God, what are we going to do? And here's what God tells Moses. It's really interesting. God tells Moses, kill the leaders. Kill the leaders. He doesn't say kill the people that are messing around or anything. He says kill the leaders. Then Moses, here's what God says, and he goes over to the leaders, and they said, what does God want? And Moses says, God says for you to find the people that are guilty of the sin and kill them. Not exactly what God said, is it? Well, these guys don't want to do this. Nobody wants to go around killing anybody. One of the kids who's a son of one of the men standing there, and all these old men are standing around crying and everything. They're supposed to be leaders of Israel, but they're afraid to take action. Moses won't kill the leaders won't kill the guilty people, and right while they're standing in front of the tabernacle crying, in comes a young couple. As it happens, the boy is the son of one of the leaders that's standing there crying, kind of like an elder's son. And he's got this Midianite girl, and they're laughing and giggling, and they're running over to a tent, and they go into this tent right in front of everybody and start making out, if you know what I mean. Right there. I mean, everybody can... Anyway, yeah, it's fairly graphic. I wish I could provide pictures for this that are really accurate, but you'll forgive me, I know. Okay. Well, the grandson of the high priest, his name is, it looks like Phineas in English. It's Pinchas in Hebrew. By the way, don't worry about Bible pronouncing all these weird names. Say it whatever it comes close, okay? There's no such thing as a correct pronunciation. That's just a little aside. Don't ever feel bad about reading and mispronouncing the names. You'll get it. Don't worry about it. Okay, so Phineas sees the young couple running in, sees the old men doing nothing about it, and he runs into the tabernacle and he pulls out this spear. He runs over to the tent where they're in the middle of the act. He takes the spear and he jams it through the guy's back and into the girl and pins them both to the ground and kills them while they're doing it in front of everybody. And when he does this, the plague stops. And God praises Phineas for taking action and bringing this thing to a stop. Okay, it got kind of hot out there, and I need to take my shirt off, and believe me, that's not something you necessarily want to see. So we're going to just finish up in here, if that's okay with you guys. Here's the thing. There's a couple of lessons that you should learn from this. One is, God holds leadership responsible for the actions of the people. Remember when we were talking about the golden calf, and Moses saw that Aaron had let the people get out of control. He wasn't interested in Aaron's excuses, but he was holding Aaron accountable for the leadership. And in this case, when God says kill the leaders, it's because God blames the leaders for letting these things get out of control. They, at their age, should have seen this coming. This isn't something that you are unfamiliar with when you're an older person. And so I want to encourage you guys as young people to have a little confidence and faith in your youth ministers and your preacher and elders and your parents and teachers. Sometimes it will seem like they don't have much faith in you because they don't seem to trust you. And that's a good thing. Until you don't trust yourself, then they can't trust you. Because all of us are able to be tempted. Satan is looking for ways, looking for weaknesses of ours so that he can attack us. And just like any good general or football coach or anyone else who is involved in strategy, you look for your opponent's weakness. That's where you attack them. And each one of you probably doesn't think of your life this way. Particularly in the case of sexual immorality, it's more common to think of it this way. You see another person, that person looks attractive to you, you start liking them, and one thing leads to another, and pretty soon you've gone too far. And that's true whether it's an actual person or just a picture of a person or whatever else. This is, for some of us, a weak point, and so Satan attacks us from there. And it always starts with something that doesn't seem like that big of a deal. And so you don't say stop. You know, how big of a deal is it to go hang out with the Moabites and